So, we're in the modern era. We have reasonable tools, not perfect, but reasonable tools to gauge Muslim anti-Semitism. I think I'm not a big fan of the ADL. I think they do a lot of things poorly. But
the Anti-Defamation,
which is
a Jewish organization.
Yes,
American Jewish, is it?
Yes. Very, very. They've been basically co-opted by the left. It's unfortunate. If we want, we can talk briefly about that. But one thing that they've done for 50 years plus now is that, and they've honed this over the years, they developed a very simple and reproducible instrument for gauging anti-Semitism. What they do is they present to the respondent 11 anti-Semitic tropes. And if the respondent agrees with the majority of them, or all of them, so if they agree with 6 out of 11 or more, they are then classified as an index case of extreme anti-Semitism. And then they apply this instrument across populations or nations or within nations broken down by religion. And they just come up with a crude prevalence of, what percentage had affirmed at least 6 out of 11 of these anti-Semitic stereotypes. In the 20 most anti-Semitic countries in the world are all Muslim countries, primarily Arab Muslim countries, but the second most anti-Semitic country in the world, just data published at the beginning of this year, but the survey was done in 2024, is Indonesia. The prevalence of this degree of anti-Semitism was 96% in Indonesia.
And what's the Jewish population of Indonesia?
Zero, but maybe there might be 1,000 Jews, and they're under siege. But I looked into this.
They're under siege?
Yes, they're under siege. They're threatened. They've been threatened not to wear kippas in public, or they'll be subject to God knows what.
Huh.
But there's 1,000 out of a country of about 280 million.
Right.
And it ranges anywhere from about 65% up to 97% in places, obviously, like the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian-controlled areas, and Kuwait. When you start to look, and ADL fortunately has done this. When you start to, actually, you can just do it yourself. If you look, for example, at the Abraham Accords countries or countries that are considering joining the Abraham Accords, it's no different. As a matter of fact, it's not statistically significant, I would say, but the prevalence of extreme anti-Semitism in countries like the UAE and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia is actually in aggregate higher than the countries that are not in the Abraham Accords. So that's a major difficulty for these leaders that seem to want to live in the real world and just, forget all this theology and just function without constant war and preaching hatred and violence. It's a real conundrum for them to deal with their populations. I also used the data and looked at, well, what about the countries in the Middle East that have banned the Muslim Brotherhood versus those countries that haven't? It's actually, again, using the ADL's data, this degree of anti-Semitism is actually worse in the countries where the Muslim Brotherhood has been banned by the governments. Mm-hmm. So we have to be sober about, and I am all for the Abraham Accords. I'm much more, I guess, cynical about them because of information like this, because of what's still being taught. But it's very important that there not be hot wars to the extent that that's possible. And even if the rulers themselves still hate Jews or hate the leadership of Israel, if they're willing to, for example, unite against a common enemy like Iran and keep the peace, I'm all for it.
Yeah,
I'm all for it.
So to come back to my original question, though, it is the case that it's the leadership of these countries that have signed the signatories, right, not the populace, and the leadership of, let's say, the Emirates. They all have their grand muftis. They all have their chief imams, right, who they must be talking with, who they take spiritual counsel from. Islam being a political as well as a religious project.
I will tell you, it's problematic. Look at Egypt, for example. Okay, and there's been a cold peace, and it's better than armies lining up against each other, since 1979. But Al-Azhar University is at the forefront of promoting this theological Jew hatred. The Vatican of Sunni Islam is at the forefront of promoting this hate in terms that are as explicit and as hateful as anything that you'll read in the Hamas covenant. I just went through this gruesome exercise, intellectual exercise, of in fully translating. I was describing it to you earlier, but fully translating a 1968 PhD thesis by the late Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University, Mohamed Tantawi. And it translates into English, The Jews and the Quran and the Traditions.
When was he writing?
This was published in 1968 originally. And he went on to become the Mufti of Egypt. That's in a government position, and then the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University. So Mufti in 1986, Grand Imam in 1996, and he died of an MI, a heart attack, while he was Grand Imam in 2010. To cut to the chase, this is a 766-page Arabic original, and it reads like it's a long version of the Hamas covenant. All the vitriol that you get in the Hamas covenant, the Islamic sources, the Islamic sources as a basis for modern forms of anti-Semitism, like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, it's all in this, laid out in horrific detail. When he and actually the version that we translated was the reissue on basically about the 30th anniversary. It came out in 1997. So Tantawi had been Grand Imam for 1 year at that point. And he wrote a brief introduction to it where it's very clear that he believed everything. You thought, well, maybe with maturity, he's now the Grand Imam. No, it was an endorsement of it. Not only that, he met with the chief rabbi, Israel Meir Lau, at that time also in 1997. And he affirmed publicly, he knew all about the Jews. He had written this PhD, and he still believes in everything that he wrote in that PhD thesis. And so his successor is Ahmed Al-Tayeb, and a practical realm. A darker, even practical realm. Tantawi sanctioned homicide bombing against Israelis. He referred to this Quranic epithet for Jews. It's the 5th surah, the 60th verse. He referred to Jews as apes and pigs, sons of apes and pigs. His successor, Ahmed Al-Tayeb, we talked briefly about Quran 582, the verse that the great polymath in the 9th century Al-Jahiz felt was at the root for the anti-Semitism and the Muslims of his era in Iraq and in Baghdad. Twice in 2013 and 2017 on national Egyptian television, Tayeb has gone into a discourse about how this verse, Quran 582, where the Jews are claimed to harbor the greatest animosity towards the Muslims, this defines our being the Muslims, relationship with the Jews, and it's been this way for 14 centuries on national TV in Egypt. Now, it may be that this is allowed because it's an escape valve for some of this, hatred instead of maybe manifesting in other ways. I mean, that may be an excuse for it, but it has an effect. It's giving a religious imprimatur from the highest level. Basically, Al-Azhar is the closest you'll get to a Vatican of Sunni Islam, and Sunni Muslims are about 85-90% of the world Muslims. And this goes on and on. They actually ratcheted it up after October 23rd. You can see the day that the massacre was taking place.
October 2023, you mean?
I'm sorry. October 7th, 2023. I'm sorry. October 7th, 2023. The day the massacre was taken, the body count wasn't even known yet, but hundreds were known to have been killed. Al-Azhar issued a statement celebrating the Hamas resistance. Less than 2 weeks later, they issued a formal fatwa, again from Al-Azhar, saying that there are no non-combatants in Israel. That all Israeli citizens are appropriate candidates for jihad. So I don't. Again, you're correct. You'll never see more. You'll never see more. You'll never see President Sisi saying something like that. You'll never see that. But it's almost more important if Al-Azhar says it at one level. It isn't, but it isn't on one level. It is on another level that the religious authorities speak this way. And I gave you that example of, why do they gratuitously have to recite Quran 582 during a Ramadan celebration? So I look, on a practical level, I don't care how much the Egyptian president hates Jews. I don't care how much Al-Azhar hates Jews if there's peace on that border.
Yes.
But I don't see how this goes away without there being direct challenging to this and to this type of teaching, institutional teaching. And I think that has to come from Jews, and that has to come from non-Muslims, because it's clearly not coming from Muslims. You will never see a Muslim challenge. No one ever challenged Tantawi, the late Grand Imam. No one is challenging Ahmed Al-Tayeb. Pope Francis, before he passed, was involved in all kinds of interfaith dialogue with Ahmed Al-Tayeb. This never came up. In fact, the only politician I could ever get to say anything about this was Geert Wilders.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.